Hello, it's Helen Godden here, and I'd like to teach you everything I've ever learned about using INKtense pencils on fabric. Okay, so today I'm going to teach you about the fabric choices and how we can control the movement of the colours by using different techniques, all without using aloe vera or any kind of textile medium, but using the right fabric in the right combination. I'm going to go through some basics with you, and then we're going to work on a Blue Wren project, and you'll be able to create this little design here of this gorgeous little blue wren ready to become a block of a quilt or a wall hanging or a patch of a bag or just a beautiful sample of how to use these INKtense pencils. Now, one of the very first things I need to talk about when it comes to fabric is the choice of fabric. And this is calico or muslin, as it's called in some countries. It is 100% cotton. It is a fairly inexpensive fabric. Okay, it's got those little black dots in it sometimes. It's sold in all different widths, so you can make any size project you like. And when it arrives, it is fairly stiff with starch or sizing. And that is the true magic of this fabric. A lot of people will think they need to wash the fabric. We absolutely do not want to wash it. We want to keep that sizing in there because that is what's going to give us control. So how do we know if we've got the right fabric? I've got a glass of water here, and if I flick the water on the fabric, it just makes little beads on the fabric, and they sit there, and they'll sit there for ages. They don't sink in. Any other fabric that you flick water on, and you can go try it now, it'll just sink in and spread. Okay, it's the sizing on this fabric that makes it bead, not bleed, and that's the really important thing. So you can go along to your various fabric shops and start flicking the fabric, and they'll think you're crazy or blessing the fabric or something, but that is what we want. Okay, that means the water stays where I put it unless I push it into the fabric. So it's buying that correct fabric and not washing it that is so important. So with our INKtense pencils, they come in all different colours, and what's a really good idea is to start yourself a colour chart. So let's just do that here where I've labelled the colours, and I'm going to fill those in, and we're going to be able to add the water to those to activate them and to make the colour sink into the fabric, and then we will see their true colours. Now you can see this is not looking terrific because you can still see the pencil marks. So when we add the water though, the pencil lines disappear, and you can push harder. There is a variety of blues in your set, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to differentiate them. So making yourself a colour chart so you really know what's going on, I find to be quite beneficial. Right, so then I grab one of my paintbrushes and some water, and let's have a look what happens. Okay, now that's a great way for us to see that colour. Try the next one. Right, that is much more intense. This is the deep indigos. This is going to be quite a dark navy blue. Now this is a sky blue. That's more of a cerulean colour. And this is the violet. And this is the charcoal. So you can see that can get quite dark. Now straight away what you might be noticing, other than the beautiful colours, is the fact that these have not bled past where I painted them. Okay, that is the beauty of this fabric. I am not using any medium or anything. In fact, you can almost see that the fabric is starting to kind of warp or wrinkle there, because literally this fabric is unwashed. So now when I have wet this area, there is some shrinkage of the fabric, whereas here there is no shrinkage. This has not had the water on it before, and that's the shrinkage that's happening. So as you work on the piece, it can get wrinkly, but once it's completely dry and we iron it, all that wrinkle is gone. At the very end, if you have somewhere that's very wrinkly, and this section through here where there's been no water, needs to be flattened out. That's where I would spray it with a little bit of spritz in a bottle, and that will then iron out completely. But the point that I want you to see here is that those colours are not bleeding. So making a colour chart is very important. But next thing, I want to talk to you about having control of the colour with two different techniques, and these are very much watercolour painting concepts. The idea of painting wet on wet or wet on dry. Now you might have heard those terms before. It's fairly obvious. Wet on wet means using wet colours onto wet surface, whereas wet on dry is putting the wet onto a dry surface. Okay, now I tend to work wet on dry, so let's have a look at that first. I'm just going to write that here, wet on dry, and this is going to be wet on wet. Okay, so wet on dry. I have the pencil here and I'm applying it to the dry fabric. Okay, this is where you want your strokes to be what I call sympathetic to the shape. If I am colouring in a circle, if I just do this business, I'm getting very flat straight lines on my circle. But if I do this kind of thing, it's going to get a more circular shape. I'm being sympathetic to the shape I'm trying to make. Okay, now I don't have to fill that all in. That is plenty of pigment to fill that. One mistake I see with people is they try to colour the whole thing in to make this be absolutely solid, plain red. Now if that's the colour you want, why don't you just go use applique of some fabric? Okay, these pencils are a watercolour pencil. It's going to give us beautiful variations. Now let's have a look at what happens when I now wet this and move and activate that colour. Okay, so all those colours will mix and blend together, but there will remain a more orange section here, a more red section there, and maybe a lighter patch in the middle. So where it is all wet, all those colours will move together and play with each other, but they are staying within this wet patch that I created with the brush. That is the beauty of this fabric. They will not go beyond that wet patch. Moisture wants to stay with moisture. Those two patches of watery colour will keep mixing with each other, but they won't go beyond that wet patch. They want to stay with each other. Moisture wants to stay with moisture. Absolute control of where that colour has gone, but within that boundary, letting it do a little bit of its own magic. Now, as it is wet, I'm going to add a bit of something in here. Now you can see that goes on really, really solid because the wetness of the fabric grabs that colour off the pencil. So then I might help it move. This is what I call tickling. Okay, now that is still going to continue to move. The moisture I've added here is going towards the moisture here, and with the moisture the colour travels, moving within that shape. It is still not going outside that shape, but within that shape I'm getting a little bit of magic happening. Okay, another different blue, just the teeniest of bit, but of course it's transparent colour, so that's gone a greeny tone. It hasn't gone blue. You're not going to get blue on top of red. It's mixing. Everything is transparent. So now I'll do another example over here, wet on wet. So this time I have actually painted a shape on there. Now you can hardly see it. I can only just see it. I have painted a moon shape on there. I'm actually kind of pushing. I'm pushing the water in. Now what happens when I add some red there? See how it moves. Okay, it is moving. Oh, I didn't put red down there. It is moving. It is moving within that wet patch. Let's put some orange down here. So this is the magic of these colours, is they will move with moisture. And this is where I get a bit anti the whole textile medium or extender or aloe vera, all these fancy things that people add, because they don't let it move. They just control it. You're not going to get this kind of movement that we can have, which ends up giving us beautiful variations of colour. Okay, that is going out to the edge of where I painted the water, but it is not going any further. So I have absolute control without aloe vera. But then I can tickle it and help it. And that's going to continue to move, but it's not going to go past the edges. Now that's not the way I like to work. I much prefer this because I get the strong colours and control of what's going on. So now when you want to paint the next shape next to that one, I've told you that moisture equals movement. If I paint my next shape, another circle, okay, another circle right here. Okay, now I'm holding it with my hand. Now we can see that I can make beautiful greens there. Right, now if I wanted that to come very close to that red, if this is wet, if I touch this wetness into that wetness, the two are going to share, even just by one little bit. Okay, so basically if one area touches the next, it's going to bleed because moisture likes moisture. So if they're side by side, that's okay, but if they touch, they're going to share. So if you're doing a whole design and you've painted this section, now move over here and then move over there and then here and back to there again. Consistently random. Okay, consistently random, so that whilst you're painting a different section, the other section is dry. Because I can assure you, once that is dry, you can absolutely iron it, and then you can even paint over the top of it again and it will not move. So that's when you can paint on top. Now what happens when we paint on top is, of course, if underneath was yellow and it's now completely dry, but I now paint blue on top of the yellow, they are going to look green because there's yellow underneath and then there's blue on top. Blue and yellow make green, but these are transparent. Okay, so whatever you've done first is always evident at the end. I'm going to just give you an example now of using a textile medium and what it doesn't do for you. Now look, you can choose to do whatever you like, but this is just something that I'm trying to teach people and show people that there are alternatives to using the medium, because I believe the medium is adding an extra process that is time consuming and tricky. You're making it more complex than it need be. You're paying for that medium as opposed to buying the right fabric in the first place. The medium makes the fabric more stiff because you're adding a acrylic, you're adding a stiffness, a plasticness to the fabric, so it does lose its softness. If you ever washed it and it's got the aloe vera gel on it, for instance, that's going to wash off. And what's going to wash off with the aloe vera? Some of your intense colour. So these pencils are designed to be activated by water. So that's what I go with. Okay, so let's have a look what happens with the medium. I'll try and do a similar kind of sample, and let's just put a different colour in there so we can see it. Now if I use the medium instead of the water, those colours will not move from where I've put them. See that hard line between one colour and the next? That's not going to change. So however you put them on is how it stays. You're not getting any of the magic of the fact that these colours like to move and mix and do magic things. Look at this beautiful change here. How that dark colour has crept up the edge there. That dark has crept all the way up there. Some of that green has gone in, some of that red has gone in. There's magic happens, and it's got a beautiful soft watercolour variation to it. That is the magic that happens when you're not looking. Anyway, I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about there. So now we're going to actually work on a real project. So this is available for you to print out this design, enlarge it, trace it onto your calico, and let's have a look.